it gives some perspective to scale or map for the starters. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. And from the organization point of view, like talking about my experience, there are mainly teams which deals with the technology, then the development, then the operations. So what DJ talked about, I'm not sure. Please do correct me if I go wrong. It's about the operational part. If I talk about the kind of products that I've come across, it's like when the development team develops a code, then cybersecurity comes over there where you need to secure this code. Then the access to a particular space, such as if you are dealing with a particular project, then your identity accesses are maintained over there. You get permission workflow. This is one particular kind of a structure that works in infosec teams. So if you talk about the technology space, there are teams that do development, there are teams that looks after the securities, and there is operations. So development, when it happens, they need to secure their workflow, the way they develop stuffs, and there are different ways to do it. Like in case of code, they need to secure their code. In case of access to a system or a particular client, or let's say a server, they need to secure these accesses or the communication between them. So a bit about this. And infosec teams, they kind of come at the later picture or sooner, depending on how your organization structure is. So these teams, they keep on looking how the development is going on or how the operations are going on. If the communication between them is based on out of certain technological channels, then these channels are secured, etc. So bit of exposure that I have.
That really helps, Siddharth. Thank you. That builds perspective for me.
So while I work for a vendor, so we don't have a security team, but what I've noticed in the US at least is that there is a skills shortage as well in cybersecurity. So many enterprises, especially mid-sized enterprises, can't afford to build out a security team right away and security technologies on top of that. So I mean, traditionally, MSPs have solved that, MSSPs. But over the last couple of years, MDRs have really grown, and they are actually an extension of the security team for many mid-sized enterprises. MDR is a managed detection and response, and they differ from MSSPs in that the MDR owns the entire product portfolio. They quickly deploy on customer A, customer B, and so on, and they do full incident monitoring and response. So this helps organizations because if you don't have the wherewithal and the expertise to know which people to hire, what products to use, what process to set up, MDRs always form a best practice template as you in parallel build your security team out. So working with MDRs and having MDRs be cognizant of policies, what controls to set up, I'm guessing will also be important. So hopefully that adds some more context.
Yeah, that's a very I would say that's a very smart business model on the MDR's part, so to say. But what really concerns me is these are the best practice templates which generally they end up using, and there could be many customizations which would be required around a client's product or the framework, etc. I'm not pretty sure if the customization is also a probability or a possibility, and in fact, I'll be interested in knowing that has anyone really deployed any MDR solution or got it customized to their needs.
So you're right. First of all, whenever we start any kind of cybersecurity contract with a client, we have to see, we actually start with the business risks first. Yeah, what is it that the business side of the house deems to be, they consider it to be risky, right? Of course, the low-hanging fruits are, of course, regulatory compliances and so on and so forth, and so on. Then we also look at their technology stack. Are they running a legacy technology stack? That means that's going to be a huge problem, right? If it's a legacy stack, then probably that needs extra care. On the other hand, if it's a largely cloud-based stack, then they don't have to worry much. Then they just throw in a solution like a Zscaler, for example, and it's a secure web gateway. So that takes care of pretty much everything. But one thing that I've seen consistently, and this is probably the biggest bang for the buck, is the so-called 8th firewall. The 8th firewall is, of course, the humans. So the best bang for the buck that organizations can get is by training the users very well in cybersecurity. So cybersecurity hygiene starts with the people. So if you have people who are very careless and they don't follow good practices, no amount of cybersecurity can help them, right? So I think that is usually a good start. So I know I'm not deliberately addressed the full because this can go on and on. One quick thing I wanted to hear from all of you guys, since all of you guys are out in the field and dealing with clients, how has COVID impacted the business?
I mean,
So
I can take that for
business
us.
has
There's been no
gone up, has it gone down?
nothing happened for us. I mean, just to give you context, we are a distribution company. We are a value-added distributor, focusing on very niche technologies that are yet to be adopted market. We kind of look at the West and understand what are the technologies that the large companies are buying, like the Fortune 100 companies, and see which of those technologies are relevant for similar companies in this part of the world, right? So, banking and government sector and airlines and large retail companies, they have the same challenges as the companies there in the West, but they don't have access to technology as easy as the companies in the West. So we kind of try to bridge that gap. So for us, our sales cycle is very long. So that could be also a reason when I say that it's not been impacted, because it's been going on for so long a time. We work with very large customers on very large projects, so it hasn't been impacted. But I'm sure for a fact that there are people in the market who've been impacted because they work with mid-sized customers as well, SMB customers as well, and for them the sales cycles would have changed, the priorities would have changed. If for example you sell a solution that is based on number of users, obviously you're going to lose out on a lot of money, right? Because a lot of people are losing jobs. For example, Emirates Airlines cut 30% of their staff the last 3 to 6 months. They were at 60,000 employees. They're now at 40,000, going down further. So all of those things are going to come into picture. If you have a recurring business from the same, like for example, all technology sells on a subscription model, right? You pay per year per user. Now, year on year, you're losing number of people that are working with you, which means companies have lower revenues per user. That's definitely going to be there. One challenge we've seen particularly is that we are a little concerned about the next year from a sales perspective, right? How do we build prospects for 2021 and 2022? Because we haven't met customers face to face, and in sales, mostly the first, you bait the customer in your face-to-face meetings, right? When you talk about challenges, you talk about problems and solutions and stuff. So that's what I feel. I mean, Raghu probably would have a different opinion, maybe.
Yeah, Namit, I mean, so we work very closely with Namit, so partly agree with him on this. But on the other side, since we interact with many more entities than the standard model which Namit works with, so there we see some kind of challenges with most of the government entities, wherein they have been impacted drastically, as in wherein they wanted to go for a full-blown elaborate solutions, but they couldn't go forward because of the impact of the business, and how it would be for Dubai, especially when it caters more to the tourism part of it. So there are certain entities like Dubai Tourism, where they have completely cut down on all the projects for almost next an year, and have been given a clear mandate of saying that do not even venture out into anything further, any kind of solutions. Even for the existing business, say suppose they have an email security solution and they have to renew it, even those kind of solutions, they have been asked to give a business justification. What is going to happen if they don't renew? What is the impact to the business? And can they live with the risk? It's like they're forming a risk committee and accepting the risk, or either mitigating the risk or transferring risk to someone else. So it's impacting banking sector. Not much of an impact as such when we see it with, but government, yes, a major chunk, and the smaller players or most of the players in the hospitality sector also got impacted very badly. Projects have been stopped midway, even though when they were actually delivered, still they are still facing challenges. Maybe by end of the year, if things settle down and mobilize, it could be a different case. But otherwise, yes, there are definitely some challenges in our areas.
For me, things got worse and then they got better. So I'm at a Series A startup. Most of our customers at this stage will be early adopters. So immediately after the pandemic hit, if you want to reduce your budget, your early adopter budget is probably the first one to go. So plenty of deals weren't cancelled, but they were pushed forward by a quarter or 2 quarters. So things were worrying for a while. They are much better now because, I mean, A, everyone is using email more now. B, our solution is API based, so it's not an on-premise gateway. So it sounds manipulative. You have to do these mental gymnastics to think, will my product help people better in the remote age or not? But if you genuinely believe it will, then I have seen products, other demand increase, in fact, for products that are flexible enough to support both sort of an office environment and protect workers at home.
Very interesting conversation.
Is there a hot topic that somebody wants to look at? I mean, from a technology or a process. I mean, the reason I say that is, for example, the last few years, the whole SOAR, EDR, NDR, and the triad from Gartner has been picking a lot of heat. Right? What do you think is going to be the next big thing? There was identity and access management at some point in time. Now people are talking about cloud security and protecting remote workers, going cloud native, DevSecOps. What are you seeing? What trends are you seeing in your industries or in your regions that you're working in?
So this yes,
Go ahead, Pawan, please.
So I'm saying in the cloud also, what I'm seeing that serverless computing is gonna increase very heavily, and that is gonna change lots of product which we are using right now from an infrastructure, because I don't have much experience from an applications, the drone, or all these new automations like cars are coming. That's are different. But if I talk from an Azure perspective, this serverless computing will change the dynamic about how CSO is looking a security product. So definitely I can read, or we are also, because I have to make a presentation in next month, that how we can secure our serverless computing, and I can add more value in our webinar.
So we'd love to hear that. For us, at least for us in Dubai, it's still a very fancy word to use. We are nowhere close to any customer who's seriously evaluating that. We have customers moving to the cloud, looking at Kubernetes, looking at various approaches to that, but serverless is far away for us. So it'll be great to hear from you.
For me, like, I need to develop a product roadmap for around next year. So DevSecOps is certainly something that is going to grow in coming next 2 to 5 years, as per the market research. Not certain, because sometimes it gets into the hype cycle as well. Certainly, there is a hype around securing the machine identities, and our main focus for around next 5 years would be in this space only. Kubernetes is one of the integrations that I'm driving currently, and certainly our product is also API based, and we would be trying to integrate with as many as DevOps tools.
Just to give you some context, is that one of our pillars in a portfolio at the company I work for is DevSecOps, and we also have a sister company that is focused on DevSecOps professional services. Any kind of migration, any kind of transformation projects that customers have in the region, we're picking them up for people who are looking to move into a DevSecOps kind of an environment. So if you need any help, please let me know.
Sure, great, Namit. That would be really helpful.
So I believe DevSecOps would be an interesting conversation for the entire group, I believe, because unless you are a practitioner like yourself, and if people like me who are just sitting at the periphery, just looking at from outside in, we may not have those level of details, obviously. So probably in one of the next sessions, would you be kind enough to walk us through the DevSecOps solutions that you have?
I mean, I may not be the best person to do that, but I can definitely get somebody to talk about it, even if it's an outsider. Probably because, like Siddharth was saying, and also Pawan was saying, right, DevSecOps is on that journey towards serverless company, or the complete change of infrastructure as we see it, and everything that we do today will change, right? Right from the way Deepika looks at it from a legal perspective, to how an infrastructure person looks at it from an infrastructure management perspective, to even the concept of security. Right? We might not be talking about security so differently at some point in time, because it will be inherently baked into the entire process. So security will not be a big thing at that point in time, because it's a hygiene factor. It will be expected. So I can definitely talk for 5 to 10 minutes on DevSecOps, but if we need to get the right people to get into depths of that, I get that arranged. That's not a problem.
Sure, I think that would be great. And you rightly mentioned the whole change that's happening, of course, from a bolt-on security as an afterthought to shift left, think security first, and so on. Yes, that's right.
So it's a very fancy jargon to throw at people who do not know cybersecurity. Right? The world is shifting left, and they'll ask you what it means, and then you go into talking about DevSecOps.
Yeah, in reality, the world is shifting right, but yeah.
Yeah, so SOAR, if it's still a hot topic, I was lucky enough to spend 2 years there, so happy to talk about SOAR if it is of interest to the group. Couple of other areas of interest that I'm seeing in conversations with security practitioners. The first is XDR. So there have historically been EDR, which protects the endpoint and analyzes those signals. NDR is for network. XDR, which was started by Palo Alto Networks, I believe Trend Micro also has a product now, tries to centralize signals from as many sources as possible, so that the threat insights you get, the security analyst doesn't have to look at 6 different screens to manually correlate data anymore. So at the detection point, you get a much richer storyline of how the attack happened. And X in the XDR stands for whatever you want, basically. So for Palo Alto Networks, it's network, endpoint, and cloud. So that's an interesting area which at least Gartner puts in some sort of the upward trend of their hype cycle. So yeah.
So in general, there are areas, for example, if you look at the security operations center, that's where all these tools will be more relevant, right? So people who are really actually doing the real security stuff, this is applicable to them. But if you look at a bigger picture, right, especially if you're talking to the C-level staff and the business folks, they are far removed from these things, right? It becomes a little bit of a hard sell to, for them, to invest their time to try to understand these tools and what SOAR will do and so on and so forth. So how do you break it down to a language that they will understand, right? So it has to be business relevant to them, that, okay, rather than trying to understand, it will make the life of an analyst easier. Why would they bother? They don't even know what an analyst do. And probably they might have outsourced the whole thing somewhere. So how do you guys really sell this?
I mean, if it were, we also sell a SOAR platform, Abhishek. Sorry for that. We sell Swimlane in the market, and I'm sure you heard of Swimlane.
Oh, I am no longer at them, so sell away.
Yeah, sorry for the past competition. what we normally, whenever we talk about SOAR, right? If you talk to a CISO, the conversation is around mean time to respond, MTTR, right? How much time does it take for you to actually detect an attack and respond to it? And this is a statistic that all CISOs should have at hand, right? And if they say it takes 10 minutes, we ask them, what is the loss that you make in 10 minutes, right? Can you present this to the board? Can you say that we are going to be vulnerable to a hacker or a state-sponsored system for 60 minutes and we can't respond or we can't stop the breach? So that's where the SOAR idea comes in, right? And I think this is the difference between how people from a policy background approach security and people from a technology background approach security. There's always this risk approach versus technology approach. And to kind of bridge that gap, the best way to talk about is how are you looking at security? Are you looking at security from a detection perspective? Are you looking at it from a prevention perspective? Or are you looking at it from a preemption perspective? There are different aggressive ways of looking at security. If you're looking at prevention, you will have a SOC, you will have, or even detection for that matter, you'll have a SOC, you'll have an analyst looking at the screen. The problem with that approach is you're putting money on people or manual and looking at alerts, and there's a lot of alert fatigue. So how do you kind of use that? How do you need to respond? The whole idea of took off. I remember in 2015 when a colleague of mine came and told me that there is something called SOAR. At that point, this company called Resilience, which IBM later acquired, and it made a lot of sense because you're actually kind of automating all the tasks that you're doing in a high pressure environment. Because a SOAR to be compliant. So, for example, if you have a breach, the next 10 minutes, everything is automated, right? People are informed, your policies are changed, your servers are brought down if, if required, whatever things that you configure, any kind of that you want. So that kind of brings down the whole MTTR and reduces the window for the hacker to get into your system. And again, depending on the, CISOs are also very different these days, right? What we've seen is there are CISOs who've grown from an IT background and become CISOs. There are people who've been in the risk and compliance perspective and gotten to become CISO. There are people who are hands-on technology guys and become CISO. So for each person, it's very different. A technology guy would understand the pain of an analyst, right? Because he's sat there, he's done that. A risk guy would understand the MTTR approach of opening it up to vulnerability or the vulnerability being open to hackers. An IT guy would probably not get all of these things. He'll probably be worried about availability of the system, right? Because IT is also about availability and operationally, keeping things up and running. So these are the conversations that we normally have. And to be honest, Middle East is a very easy market to sell in, because if you have a toy that is fancy enough, people would like to buy it, right? And if anybody else is buying, I also want to buy. That's the psyche here. And if the US is already saturated with that, Gartner is going to push it down everybody's throat here and say that, SOAR is the next thing that you should have. And we see that quite a lot, to be very honest.
Yeah, I think this is very...
But again, sorry, again, Namit, even though we say all these things in the Middle East, you don't find more of a mature customers who are actually venturing to SOAR. Most of them are still stuck at the SIM stage itself. So when you even try to talk about SOAR, they're like, first let me get this SIM thing right, which I have in my environment. They have challenges with the existing setup itself. So that's not the case when you compare it to the other parts across the globe to Middle East.
Again, on that point, right? I'm sorry I'm talking about it so much, but this is the same problem that we have with SIM technologies, right? For SIEM technologies, everybody has a SIM technology, but how many of those customers are leveraging the technology is a question, right? How much of that is being leveraged to kind of, what are the quality of the alerts? You have the same problem with SOAR. There are a lot of customers who bought SOAR, but they have no clue what to do with it, right? People are probably doing the same thing that they're doing with SIM with a SOAR, and very little has been done on the actual automation. Because again, one point that Abhishek wrote in the group earlier when he joined is around how these SOAR platforms integrate with the rest of the devices and the assets in your network, right? Because it's all about automation, and if you can't integrate with the third-party vendor, that's where the challenge lies. So SOAR will take time for it to become mature and something that is going to be a must-have. But I think in the US it's more mature because of the way MSSPs have run with it and kind of made it part of their offering. In at least we've seen people just buying it for the sake of buying it, because of the Gartner push.
Yeah, but let me rightly mention, and Suraj, I think there is nothing called mature in US also. I met with someone for CSO, and as Namit described that from which background the CSO is coming, that itself will say that, okay, that's a mature organization or mature market. Because I have seen in US also some CSO will be like not ready to accept the new technology. And my CSO, which like I met with an interesting CSO, and his point is very clear that you can push so many tools unless you're not configuring properly. And after configuration, if you don't have your operationalization properly, it's not going to give you the same results. So there are so many tools and technologies available, I think, in a security landscape of every organization, and they are not fully configured and operationalized also. So SIM is one of the area, I think, which is a pretty good concept, but how you are taking alerts, and nowadays with the cloud, because I'm using right now 5 different clouds, and integrating their securities, taking logs, putting log into the SIM is really very, very challenging.
Guys,
So first, we need to understand what background CSO is coming if we have to push anything, and then only we can pitch our product or our solution to them.
Very interesting.
So I had a question. This is Saurabh. As I said, one of the challenges I'm working with is to help a government department reduce its cyber security risk. But my first question to the group, if I can, is how do you measure cyber security risk? Have you come across a framework, a method, something that can help you define that this is where I would put on a scale of 0 to 5 or 1 to 10, or very risky to least risky. This is where the department stands when it comes to cyber security risk.
Saurabh, this is very interesting. So, are you in the US or which government department?
I'm
Oh,
in
okay,
DU.
okay.
I'm in London.
So I think
It's a UK
here
government.
in the US it's pretty clear. We use NIST's cybersecurity risk management framework, right? So if you type NIST 837, that is the or NIST
Mm-hmm.
RMF, that is an excellent framework. It's very clear, absolutely precise, and you can. There's a pretty high degree of objectivity in how you achieve or how you kind of identify the risks and score them.
Okay. Okay. I've heard of NIST. The only challenge is one, it's American, and the second thing is it's because it's a government department. They don't want to use that. So I'm looking at practically transferring something which is like NIST but can be implemented on the ground. So if anybody of the group or even DJ, you've got some experience or you would like to share a few emails with you outside of this group to understand a few things.
Yes, of course. So we can, have a one-on-one as well, Saurabh. So please connect up with me, and I'll see how I can help you. Uh, I'm sure I've had these conversations in the past with, of course, I can't tell you all this, but anyway. So what I can say is that routinely U.S. Government agencies and UK agencies work hand in glove. So again, we have a kind of a threat intelligence agreement in place. So whenever there is a nation state kind of a threat which is discovered by either the UK or Israel or the US, we all exchange information. I've been part of those discussions a lot, where, for example, nation state kind of threats are discussed. So I'm sure there should be no issues with the UK using the NIST framework. This framework is anyway open to public.
Sure. So let me catch up with you separately then.
Yeah, just to add to that, I actually had a chance of working on doing the risk assessment here to one of the government entities. So as part of that, we had to conduct the risk assessment for almost 158 departments within the government entity. So what we did was we took up a kind of a manual approach in terms of we relied more on ISO 31001, which is the enterprise risk management framework. So we, instead of only relying on NIST, we actually added this as well. And then we took other consulting engagement in terms of we did an architecture review. We did the entire assessment based on the people, process, technology aspect of it. We arrived at a framework through which we derived the values for the acceptable risk. And then we had to sit with each and every business owner to understand what is acceptable for them, what is not acceptable for them. And then we had to do an entire impact probability assessment. We had to dwell deep into the entire thing. It was almost a 6-month activity which we did here. So it just didn't rely on this thing. But at the end of the day, again, we had to build up a tool also for them wherein they could automate the entire results, as in use this data, whatever they've acquired over the Excel, get into that system and then generate results so that they know what is the most risky department internally and what needs to be done. So again, it's a consultative approach mostly.
Sure. Thanks for sharing. I'll come back to you as well, Vamsi.
So the other point, I don't know, sort of maybe it's tangential. So apart from considering a framework to define your risks, there's another framework that Gartner has introduced recently called CARTA. Maybe it's not that recent, it's 2018, Continuous Adaptive Risk and Trust Assessment, where how you build out your security architecture as well to not only manage risks of today, but by definition, all risks are not known. So an architecture that can best adapt to unknown risks that come in without having to wait for new policies to arrive. So in the meantime, also it can adapt. I'll share a couple of articles in the chat on Carta, but hopefully that's useful as well.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Thanks.
Yeah, Abhishek, that will be good if you can send Gata. Okay, I think you did something.
He's already shared it on the group.
He's already shared it, I think. Yeah.
I shared something, and I mean, when Gartner coins a term in the afternoon sometime, they're not shy of promoting it. So if Carta interests you, there's more than enough literature available.
Yeah. And if Gartner said it, everybody understands it. So easy to stick to that language.
Do you have access to Gartner report, Abhishek? Like, do you get lots of Gartner data?
I do, yes. I accidentally lead analyst relations at the startup, not traditionally within product marketing's purview, but it's been actually pretty interesting. I found analyst relations to be like brushing your teeth. It's not very glamorous, but if you don't do it, then it's going to be a problem. But yeah, I have access to Gartner research.
We do that as well here. So similar way, even I manage the Gartner relation for our firm. So yeah, we get on to that, and it's a quick 30-minute call which we usually have with them, and it's actually very insightful.
That's good, Suraj. So it will be great if you guys can share whatever is possible to share. I don't have access to the Gartner, and it's easy to sell Gartner things to the customer.
One of the best things that I've understood from Gartner is that they have the best sales machine. Not only from a pre-sale perspective, but from a post-sale perspective. All the Gartner salespeople that I've spoken to or interacted with, even now, are probably the best salespeople I've seen, because they're with you throughout. And that's, I think, one of the, and they also do the sales training for your folks. I mean, if that's something that any of you want to look at, sales training is also something that Gartner can do for you if you're a customer for them. Apart from all the technical stuff that they anyway are good at.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add, I personally have a favorite spot in cybersecurity with the identity and access management space. So if any of you need help or some direction around that, please reach out to me. I've kind of done quite a lot of work on that front.
Very good, Namit. Yeah, that's a very interesting area. Currently, I'm engaged in, and it goes pretty. I would say that's very close to the business. So yeah. IIM is one area in cybersecurity where it's rather easy to make a business case. And
the cloud also nowadays, Namit, that is the main security. Like
correct. Yeah.
So if you can do a session or share something, it will be really great help.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, very interesting, Namit. And to whatever extent SASE is linked with identity and access management, that's another thing that is on everyone's lips right now.
Yeah, it's all getting blurred now. Right?
Yeah,
CASBs and SASE and everything is becoming a little bit of a complicated terminology right now. But yes. Sorry, Saurabh.
No, I was going to ask the question, has anybody of you have had any experience in doing organization design or operating model work for a company around security or cyber security? And by that, I mean, within a company, there will be, the management, there will be the business, there is IT, there is estates, there's HR, there's commercial. Then there are people in security who are working. There are policy guys. There are, detect and response guys. There's lots of technologies involved. Has anybody looked at cybersecurity in the whole and tried to map how it should ideally be done in a big organization?
So Saurav, I think that is main work of a CSO. So what CSO does, defining those policies which applicable to the various department. Like for HR, nowadays HR itself is a part of your identity management perspectives. So HR define that, okay, what role, which department you guys are there. So Workday or these kind of a product, they come. And in my organization, like HR directly talk to CSO in terms of how identity will define. like employee, full-time employee, contractor, consultant, guest accounts, and all those things. Then legal comes as the second department where CSO need to work very closely, as this particular customers have operation in 40 plus country. So everywhere is a different rule. So very interesting thing recently happened. As you know, that Microsoft share this analytic in Office 365 about your office usage, how many emails you received, who sent, how much time you took to reply, and these analytical things which they freely shared. And Germany, as a legal, raised a concern that this is not allowed in their country. We need to go and disable that particular free service in Office 365. So these kind of challenge come from a legal department, that what is possible, what is not possible into each country, especially Russia, Brazil, China. They all come with a different kind of regulations. And then operational perspective, yes, I do have a pretty good experience to set up their infrastructure security operations, not like penetrations or any other kind of from an application, but legal, HR, CSO, and infrastructure. These four dots I can connect.
Sure. Let me come back to you on that, Pawan.
Sure, sir. Like when you somebody calls service desk to reset password, what information you can collect in each country itself is a big work for the CSO to do. How you
Yeah,
will identify that the right person is calling to reset a password. That itself, when I set up initially, it was very challenging. That which country will, because in US it's very easy. Like everybody knows SSN, you just feed your last four digit of SSN and you verify. But like in India, it's not possible, right? Or Germany has different thing. Middle East will have different rules. So consulting with the HR department and setting up those policy is very, very time consuming and heavy lifting work, sir.
Yeah, one point to add on to that is, especially since remote work has been everywhere, there's a problem of lateral data loss as well, because these policies, there is no universal policy across every product. Even though there are universal policies on paper, email Office 365 will have like a certain set of policies which doesn't necessarily communicate with what the organization uses on Slack or OneDrive. OneDrive maybe yes, but Box. So the other trend we've noticed is lateral data loss due to incomplete understanding of policies. Even if email is set up correctly, someone will download something sensitive or confidential from email, share it on a shared channel on Slack, which doesn't have any policies set up. So that's just answering with another problem, but thought of adding that point.
Saurabh, just to add my 2 cents on that, like Pawan said, it comes down to the CISO's call on how the team has to be structured, purely from a security standpoint, right? I mean, if there is a CISO at all in the first place, or is it a CIO-led initiative, or is it a CTO-led security division? And then you look at risk and compliance, you look at security operations, then you look at say, for example, all your VAs and PTs. Do you want to outsource them, or do you want to kind of insource them? And how much of your security is being driven by third party or contractors? And all of that will come in based on, again, budgets, again, the size of the company, the kind of the background of the CISO. So if you're looking at that kind of information to kind of create an organization for security, probably we can connect you to CISOs that we know in the region, and then see if you can kind of hear from them as to how they went about doing it.
Sure. I think that will be great. I think and it'll be interesting to know from the CSOs how they have addressed this challenge.
Yeah.
I was kind of probably also looking at some of these comments that have come through, like security is an afterthought. So how do you build that in? Security, cyber security sits even behind IT. Business is so far away from IT that the business does not do what it is expected of them. So what is the role of business in cybersecurity? Is everybody assurer of assurers of assurer? Are tools the only thing that will protect the organization? You can write a number of policies how you can make them real, practical. So if anybody has had experience in that, in bringing that or making that practical or real for a company, probably would be that would be useful. And if the CSOs is listening to or hearing to the CSOs might be useful in that way. So thanks for that.
Yeah, just two things that I would like to say there, right, Saurabh, just to close this, is if security is not a board prerogative, or it's not an agenda on the board, there's no point having the discussion at all, right? It's no longer business is no longer far away from security anymore, because any security breach, and if you look at the UK, for example, right, the kind of breaches that have happened, and GDPR especially coming on the table, right, any security breach leads to financial loss. There are penalties upwards of, I think, 20 million euros. That's where it starts. And it becomes a board agenda automatically because of GDPR in your part of the world, right? Secondly, security is always a combination of three things: people, process, and technology, right? And people can mean the right talent, training those people, training your users to be security aware. Process is what DJ and a lot of other people talked about from a policy perspective, being compliant with ISO 27001, ISO 20K, all the standards like NIST, NISA. NISA is very local here, but CCPA, for example, privacy regulations, whatever are relevant to your part, Sarbanes-Oxley, all of those things, right? Complying to them. And then technology, right? Technology is kind of try to enforce these policies and kind of make life easy for everyone. So these three things in combination is what will probably give you the right organization design in itself, and not just purely looking at roles and designations.
Just Namit here, I know, like you mentioned people, but usually understanding was people means only IT. Here, people means everybody in the organization.
Correct.
So all users, even if they are external to your consultant guest, they all should be aware about your policy and they should understand from that. So people is a wide range here in terms of security nowadays.
Yeah.
So Pawan, I had a question for you. One of the biggest risks to big companies is the fact that they have a lot of tech debt, which has been accumulated over years, and now they're stuck with that. So, what are the solutions out there to extricate them from this tech debt problem and move on to these DevOps, DevSecOps, cloud, and these these areas that are more agile?
So even for a small company also, I'm working right now with a company who started operation in 2016. For them itself is changing or going into the DevOps. It's not easy. So we are doing a POC where we just taken one product to go into the DevOps or SecOps kind of a things. And then as Namit said, it's the main thing, how do you train your all those users? Because with larger organization, those business users become a very things in the DevOps model. As if they are not understanding DevOps and they are not part of the entire testing and security component part, it's very difficult, sort of. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer, but this is a bigger problem, which as an organization we are facing and customer asking us to resolve it. So changing business model, changing people thought process, changing these old technologies, the migration of data from one platform to another platform, it's a big thing, sir.
And I think it breaks the back of several companies when you try doing that. Any transformation from legacy or like you said, tech debt, right, which means extremely primitive technology that you've been riding on for a long time. I'll give you an example. So Emirates NBD is one of the largest banks in the Middle East. Through the last week of July, all their mobile banking and core banking services were down because their DevSecOps project, they were kind of moving from, or they're going live on the DevSecOps initiative, right? And for an entire week, the core banking and mobile banking services were down because it failed. Now, this is a one-off case. It could happen, it may not happen, but this is the risk that you're running with, right? If you try and pivot to not DevSecOps, any new technology, right? For example, if you look at any bank, they might still be running a very primitive core banking service even today. Very few people, or only the largest banks, will try and move to the latest technologies. So the core applications that the business is running, irrespective of the domain that they are in, that's what main challenges, and that's where you find the most value in transforming, right? If you kind of move to the cloud on your peripheral technologies like your HRMS and all that, that only give you cost savings. But the real value comes in when you move your core business application to something that is new, and that is the most difficult thing to do. And that takes a lot of effort and a lot of planning internally and externally by parties, and very risky, especially for DevSecOps, because a lot of people don't understand the space.
Got it. Thanks.
I think we've spent a good 80 minutes talking about cybersecurity. So if there are, any other insights, inputs, it'll be good to hear, and then probably close. And then I think there's definitely a lot of interest for another meeting. I think maybe we should do it monthly or something.
Certainly. Thank you so much for putting this together. I think we all learn from each other. And there's so many new things which are coming up, which old people like me might overlook. There's a whole lot for me to learn from you guys. Thank you again. Certainly, more sessions are needed, and of course, in future sessions, now that the introductions are over, we all pretty much understand what each other does. We could pick up some topics and do some expert deep dives. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Good idea, DJ. I think just let's pick up one, and I think Namit, you're good in identity and access. So my proposal, we start with that at least.
Sure. Yeah, we can do something.
Thank you very much, guys. It was really nice speaking, and have a good weekend.
Guys, thank you very much, then.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
This was
Namit,
really insightful.
for
Cheers,
this
bye.
great session. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Namit. Thanks, everyone. Nice meeting everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Namit. Thanks, everyone. It was a pretty good session.